Hey everybody, Pat Kilner here with John Kirk. We're trying a new setup here in the studio, and this is sort of morphed. It's been a lot of fun. We began this whole series with John as sort of a one-off. Just, hey, what would it look like if we talked about an area, talked about an area that we know, that we run numbers in, and that's been really well received. So thanks for all the feedback on that. What it's turned into has been really a weekly event with John, where we are dealing with sort of the typical questions that happen with buyer clients, with listing clients, with sort of the fiduciary obligation that John and the team work through on a daily basis with clients. And what does that look like? And what we found is, because that's what John does every day, that's been much more engaging for folks. People have really enjoyed that. And so we're going to continue with that. And we're just going to drill down in different topics on a weekly basis with John Kirk, who, frankly, to my mind, is one of the best in the business. And I just really appreciate you, John, working through this, because I think it was probably the first time you've been on camera on Facebook ever when we did this originally, and you jumped into it.
Definitely takes a little getting used to.
It does. But you've managed it really well. And you kind of got a face for TV,
for radio,
right?
Yeah.
So we've had a lot of fun, and so we're gonna jump in to different topics. So below, feel free as the weeks go by to let us know what you want to talk about, what you want to hear about, what things do you want us to pull apart. We could talk family life, we could talk sports, we could talk all sorts of stuff. But what we do on a regular basis, what we do on a daily basis is represent clients. And so if you have questions about that, we'd be honored to work through some of these live with you here on Facebook and on YouTube and on any other medium. So let's jump in, John. How about that?
Sure.
All right. So I want to talk today specifically, and we put up on the board, about offers and the art of reviewing an offer with a client.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about what's your process when an offer comes in on a house. What's your process, and why do you follow that process when you're dealing with somebody?
Yeah, so interesting to talk about. I've heard lots of different scenarios here with different agents about how they operate. My process is actually very specific for a very specific reason, and for multiple reasons, actually. But I think initially, when I first started doing this, I would take just to learn the contract, I would take every term out of every offer and put it into a spreadsheet, more so that I could actually make sure I found all of the terms.
You don't miss anything.
You can't miss stuff in a contract.
About how many pages are you dealing with on a typical contract?
It could be 60 pages in a contract,
yeah.
Right? And then you've got addendums and all kinds of things that start flying around.
Sure.
Virginia, by the way, is not nearly as robust of a contract, and that's
You're
great.
still dealing with 30, 40 pages
exactly,
of contract.
Yeah.
So
So predominantly though,
potentially.
Yeah, totally. So what you want to be able to do is really pull out as much of the information as you can. All of the information that is there is your responsibility, my responsibility to convey to the seller. And so what I started to do very early on in my career is to take everything, put it in a spreadsheet,
yeah.
and then deliver that spreadsheet to the seller so that they knew very plainly what exactly every term was.
Yeah.
And so looking at it from that perspective, I've continued to do that throughout my career. And I've heard of agents who just send the 60-page contract over to the seller who may have never sold a house before. And I had somebody tell me that last week. I actually wrote an offer for a buyer last week, and the agent said, "I just sent the contract over. They'll call me later with their decision."
No sort of framing of that whatsoever.
like how could you? I don't know. I think it's a massive disservice to somebody who's never seen a contract before, potentially.
Sure. So you just versus throwing it out there. Now I imagine that's especially good when you peel this back and you're putting this into a spreadsheet. You're delineating the terms. It allows you to talk pros and cons of very specific things, right? What are the things that when that offer goes in? Obviously, price is important. We've talked about that. Terms are important. What are the things that you find people are most surprised at when they're looking at an offer for the first time, as you're delineating these things? What are the things that if they just read it on their own, they wouldn't pick up?
Yeah, I think more often than not, I think it's the timeframes in a contract that matter most to the deal.
Yeah.
And have the least impact on a client from initially.
Okay.
Right? Like I got a contract the other day where the home inspection contingency was 14 days.
Huh.
And I don't know, and a client may not recognize that 14 days, they have 14 days to do an inspection and to deliver you notice to get out of the contract if they want, right? So what we want on the listing side is to be able to have those timeframes as condensed as possible so that we're assuming less risk.
Sure.
And we want to move through those timeframes faster so that we can just get on with the business of going to settlement.
Absolutely.
And that's, I think, one of the big things. So I think clients are, to your question, I think clients are surprised about timeframes. I think that understanding the timeframes really well from on my side, and then presenting it to them in a way that says, hey, we're not going to have a 35-day financing contingency in here because that's 35 days until you recognize whether or not you're going to settle.
You're actually going to settlement on this thing.
And then sometimes you get it. I got a contract last week. There was a 35-day financing contingency and a 35-day settlement. So
it sounds like you're contingent the whole time.
The whole entire time, right? So how do we work through those strategically, presenting them number one, and then really working through them all together to really reduce as much risk as we possibly can.
Yeah, and for those of you who are listening, when we talk about contingencies, until you have cleared all of your contingencies on a contract, you're not fully ratified. You're not fully in a place where you know that the offer is definitely going to settle, right? You can have assurances, you can have great conversations with lenders, with title company, with the other side, but until you're past those contingencies, there's still doubt.
Yeah,
right?
And from our standpoint, we want to move through those as fast as we possibly can so that we can reduce the amount of risk that we have and, again, just get on to the business of settling the property.
And unless you're delineating that out and putting them side by side and seeing that, one, most of those contingency timeframes are going to be missed, right? Because I know when I look at a contract for the first time, I'm not going to pick out everything that I need to. I'm going to have to look at it maybe 10 times before I've really grasped exactly what I've got in the contract. Even if I review contracts on a regular basis, I'm getting this at 8 o'clock at night, trying to review it, trying to understand it. So you're really helping your clients understand all the major details. I've had situations where we'll get an offer in and the cover letter will say maybe a few things. If you get a cover letter, right? Oftentimes we've talked about this before, sending over an offer with a really good cover letter that delineates what your offer is without hiding anything is really important. But you'll find, a hidden, contingency over here, or they're splitting transfer and recordation taxes differently. Well, that's a few $1,000s that we're talking about there that we could have just ratified without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
So the opportunity cost is pretty high when you say if you don't review these things with your client in an effective way. Add to that sort of a spring market dynamic where you're dealing with multiple offers. We talked about multiple offers before. How complex is it to be able to take 2 60-page contracts or 3 or 10 and compare them side by side? Talk to me about the system. I mean, how do you do that? How do you peel apart? How does your team, because I know you got a great team behind you, how does a team get contracts at 12 o'clock on a Tuesday and review them and have them presentable to a seller by 5 p.m.? What does that look like? In terms of being able to do that effectively and consistently.
It's a lot of work. It really is. It's a lot of work, and you've got to go through each one meticulously because sometimes there are hidden things in there, right? And it's not. I don't think agents, for the most part, I don't think agents are trying to get over on another agent in the very beginning. I definitely don't think that's the case. I mean, it's pretty much like, here's our offer. Here are the cards that we have right now, and they want to present those honestly. I really do think that.
But they may lack a system for doing that consistently.
Yeah, sure. And so there could be something in there that is something that would be really detrimental to us on the sell side. And we want to understand that. So it is a meticulous process to go through all of these in such great detail. And we do make ourselves about the details of this because our sellers' lives depend on whether or not we get this right.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is an amazing position for us to be in as agents, and we know that, right? We consider the fact that every time we sit down with a family, this is about one of the most important things that they're ever going to do as an individual or as a family. We can't miss that. We cannot afford to miss for a family, right? And so that's our mentality. But so going through all these contracts, I think, by the way, to have everything in a spreadsheet is really super important here, especially when you're getting multiple offers.
Yeah.
And the process to go through all of that and to sort of categorize each offer, I think, is kind of how we want to look at it, right? We're going, okay, here's what all the terms are in this one, here's what all the terms are in this one, and sometimes you have 10, 12, 15
Are you kind of
offers.
ranking these for them ahead of time?
What's interesting is that, so I'll just go through and I like colors in a spreadsheet, right?
Sure.
So I'll just go, where I see a red term, meaning that's not a great term that's favorable to us.
Something we got to address.
It's color coded, right? So then you got, okay, that's red. And then we've got greens over here and greens and some reds. And then I'll use another color that is like, okay, this is something that we should negotiate, right? And just sort of kind of move through the offers in that way. But I've found over the years that color coding these things is actually pretty awesome, because anybody could go look at that and not even know what it is, but go, all the greens, like all of a sudden you have
Green is good.
12 greens, right? And it's like, okay, all of these terms beat out all these other offers. And then it's like, oh, well, clearly that's the one.
Yeah.
Oh, but they have one red and there's a house to sell.
Yeah.
And so, okay, that might disqualify that altogether.
Sure. It's a big red.
It's a big red.
Yeah.
So I do think that moving through these in that fashion and being so meticulous about it matters. And I think it becomes obvious when you can see these side by side which one actually stands out. And you don't know that when you get a PDF from your agent or 12 PDFs from your agent.
Sure.
Like the work is on me to deliver the information to the client.
Sure.
In a discernible way.
And so your clients are going through this, and they're usually kind of taken aback by, I'm sure, some of the terms that maybe they didn't expect to have in there. I mean, we're looking at earnest money deposit strength. We're looking at home inspection time frame, the terms of that home inspection. We're looking at how transfer and recordation taxes are split, what the buyer needs in terms of closing cost assistance, everything under the sun, not to mention price, right? Where they're settling. Is it a good company they're settling with? Is it a good lender?
Yeah.
What kind of reputation do they have? What kind of research have they done prior? There's so many things that go into this. So, the reason I wanted to bring this up is clearly there's so many variables to this, and I think in general there's two parties to this industry in many ways, and I think unknowingly agents sometimes tend to fall into one or the other, right? One is, hey, I'm here with more of an order taker mentality, right? We've seen this. You see this with the difference between, on one extreme, a legal Zoom and an amazing attorney who's defending your interests. You see this with, you've seen this in a lot of different industries, service industries in particular, and because of the ease with which we can just send off an email and allow people to see a PDF, in some ways that's created a paradigm where we're not belly button to belly button with people all the time, and because frankly their lives are busy and they're running around and there's two parties, one in Japan and one in California who we're trying to deal with. The use of technology shouldn't ever lead to a lack of detail in how we're approaching the client. And I think that's what I've always loved about some of the innovation that you've led on the team, to get the details right, as though the person was sitting belly button to belly button with you, going through every page of the contract and finding ways to make that more efficient for their busy lives, but without skimping on the things that truly matter, the things that will make or break whether they can afford tuition or private health care or whatever it is for that year, or just the ability to go out and buy that other house,
Yeah.
right, to settle because they're getting enough from this home, right? And that's these things are so fundamental to the well-being and the financial well-being in many ways of the client that it's really. I love this system because what it takes is your care for people and puts it into something that's repeatable, something that is consistent, something that whether you have a client right face to face with you. If this was your grandmother, you'd present this in the same way.
Yeah.
And
I think it's with that in mind that's why we do what we do, because we think about who our clients ultimately are, but with the mindset of it could be my mom.
Absolutely.
Right, or my grandmom, and that's really how I remember you saying, kind of when we first started out on this journey years ago. I would present this to my own mother, right?
Sorry, you were one of my clients, so we yeah, and when there's tension, I mean, frankly, that came from a place of, gosh, it is precisely how I would want it presented to somebody who I cared about,
That's right.
who has a vested interest in me and I in them. And so, as we talk about this is something that great agents will do. They'll invest themselves. And you hear a lot of agents, a lot of the folks who've been coming on board with us at Tower Hill, come on board because their value proposition is really very much wrapped up in my care for clients, right?
Yeah.
The question is, yes, I think it's a natural human tendency to want to care for people at a very, very high level.
Yeah.
The question is, great, what tool do you have to apply to that?
Yeah. Well, I also think, what does care to your client actually mean?
Yeah. What does that look like in a real physical way?
And I think most of the market, honestly, in my opinion, most of the market misses it entirely.
Yeah.
Caring for your client doesn't mean you answer the phone every 6 seconds when it rings.
Yeah.
And care for your client is outlined in a real high level consultation, and care for your client is in the details. Care for your client is in time spent late at night, mulling over, okay, what's the strategy? To me, that's care for a client. Not most maybe, but many agents that I talk to are like, well, you'll always get me. I talked to a lender yesterday. You will always get me. I will always answer the phone. All right.
What is this retail?
Yeah, I just don't see that. If you're gonna call on, if you have a giant, and I came out of the legal world, you have a giant law firm downtown, that lawyer's not answering the phone every single time that you call.
Yeah.
By the way, you probably don't want him answering the phone every time that you call because he's going to be billing you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But our care is legitimate and our care is awesome. But our care is not, oh, my phone's ringing, I got to answer this right now.
Yeah.
No, actually, I'm caring for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And my care is wrapped up in that. It's not wrapped up in whether or not I answer the phone.
It's interesting because we're taking something so simple, seemingly simple in how an offer is presented, right?
Yeah.
It seems like a really easy thing. We're really getting into what is real client care, and we didn't actually talk about getting into this, but what does that really look like at a high level, and where has the industry pushed things to say here's the value proposition of an agent?
Well, yeah, and I think what the market is now perceiving as great care is, do you answer the phone right now?
It's speed to lead, as they call it.
I can go show 6 properties to a client when they called me 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
No, actually, I had that happen to me yesterday. My value is not in whether I can answer the phone and then go show you properties on your demand.
Yeah.
That's actually not what this is about.
Yeah.
This is about something entirely different.
Well, because if that was your value, then you just pay me a flat fee. Just pay me something, nominal, because basically I'm now a taxi driver. So and that's in many ways where the industry has gone. Not all. I mean, we've got a lot of great friends in this industry who really serve clients at an amazingly high level. And I think it's important, right? I mean, we've got people who are listening here who are great, other great fiduciaries in the marketplace who are honored. When they give us a contract, it's a blast to deal with them because we know they're championing for their side. There's going to be a little bit of adversarial reality because we're going head to head and we're advocating for our clients. That exists. So don't get us wrong in terms of understanding that. Now, that is, I think is important. That that has to be fought for. It used to be that was always the norm. That's something that has to be fought for on a very consistent basis, because if you're not that type of fiduciary, the tendency is to commoditize the relationship between, we talk about this a lot on the blogs, and this commoditized relationship between the client and the fiduciary and the person who's supposed to be the fiduciary.
Yeah.
And what happens is twofold. The client does not believe that agents really have a value beyond opening doors and answering the phone and putting together some paperwork for me that I'm going to review, right? To your point, right?
Yeah.
Hey, this is for you to review. And so we see that all the time. 9 out of 10 contracts that are coming through, and this was not the case 15 years ago. 9 out of 10 don't come with a cover letter, don't come with a phone call ahead of time. And so it's, hey, throw it on the wall, see if it sticks. I'm just performing a basic administrative task for you versus a true fiduciary task for you that requires some time and investment. The reason you can't answer the phone and just go out and show a property is that, one, people deserve more than somebody who just goes out and shows a property without having done some real research. Yeah. Right. Even though they've got a lot of good information online, there's a lot that you're not seeing. Yeah. And there's a lot of research that should be done. By the way, you send over 6 properties, a good agent's gonna really whittle that down. Yeah. He's gonna say, you know what? 3 of these 6 don't make any sense for you based on your finances, based on location, based on what you've told me about your school district, based on, your specific circumstances. But if you don't have a fiduciary, they don't know that, and so they'll just show you anything, right?
And I really think that's where we are challenging what the status quo is becoming. We're not in this business to just be a concierge for opening doors. Like that's not why we're in this business. We're in this business, in my mind, to defend the interests of our clients. Yeah. And that every day, all day long, is what we ought to be thinking about. How can we defend our clients' interests today?
That has to be your obsession.
It really does. And when you have that in mind, when that's your frame of reference, you become a great fiduciary, right? Because you're thinking about the client and their interests all the time first. Yeah. And like you said, if they come in and say, well, we want to see these 6 properties, and they actually don't make sense, you want to see this property. You told me that you couldn't look at anything less than 4 bedrooms because of this family dynamic, right? Well, this is a 3-bedroom place, right? Yeah, but I thought we would just see it. Okay, fine. Sometimes you do need to see a property to be able to rule it out and kind of reframe where you're moving. I get that. But after you've gone through that process and then something comes up, it's like my job is to go, remember when we had gone through this previously, this is what this actually looks like for you and your family. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, yeah, you know what? And it has to be the agent's job to repurpose or sort of refocus or marginally shift the vision of where they're going, because you're hearing everything that they want to do.
Yeah, you should be the objective third party.
You are and you should be, and you can't be afraid as an agent to go back and say, look, when we talked about this before, this was actually the way that you really wanted this to be, and I know from having worked with you for so long, this is actually what you really want.
Well, and you're the guide, right? So you're going through, and if you're going through the jungle with them, and they're not perceiving things that you perceive because you're in the jungle all the time. You're taking them through, right? And so I'd say it's a huge point, right? Helping reorient based on needs, but also looking out for the dangers that are cropping up that are not seen. That's why you review offers, is because there's a lot of dangerous stuff in here that could bite you. Right. And we've got 30, 45 days for those things to bite you. Yeah. I'm going to limit the time that we're in the area of the jungle where you can get really hurt. Yeah. And we're gonna be on heightened security during that time. Yeah. And that's what you would expect from any other great fiduciary.
Yeah. And I was gonna just add on to that. I mean, I think when you're talking about the listing side, especially, that's our whole approach to when we meet at the initial time on the listing appointment, right? So it's not, so all the stuff that you do in advance, when I go and sit down with somebody, like, we have these approaches that when we move through a property during an appointment, we're looking at it from the perspective of, okay, what's going to come up on home inspection? Most people are like, okay, what color should I paint my room, right?
Mhm.
And to be honest, we hire people to come in and who are amazing at what they do to be able to give them real guidance on how to stage their home and what colors to paint their room. My value clearly is not on picking paint colors, and I'm not really great at that. But what I am pretty good at is really understanding where are they exposed and where are they at most at risk from an inspection standpoint, and tackling those situations before you go on the market
Yeah.
is much more important than how you're. Wow, I mean, the staging is very important, and we talked about that earlier. I mean,
Yeah, but
not on this, but
no, not at all.
but you know, staging is obviously very important. But where are they exposed from a risk? My mentality is all about managing risk for the client. And I
Yep.
think that's kind of how we approach it. But
Awesome. So that's another area we've touched on some staging. We touched on home inspection. We touched on a lot. All just because we started talking about how to present 60 pages of a contract.
yeah,
So it leaves a lot for us to talk about. Let's do it next week. Thanks everybody for listening. And again, if you have other topics you want us to really dig into, let us know. See you next week.